Hi, this is Pi TV. My name's Mira and I'm editor-in-chief of the magazine, and today we're speaking to the new provost, Michael Arthur.
My name is Michael Arthur and I'm president and provost of UCL.
Thank you for speaking to us today. First question, how are you settling into your new role?
It's fantastic. I mean, this is a wonderful university, a phenomenal academic institution, highly successful.
I mean, obviously, wonderful that UCL is. There's always room for improvement.
Sure.
I mean, I know you've only been here for a few weeks, but have you seen anything that you think you'd like to change? What are your plans for UCL?
A couple of things, and let me focus on the things that relate to students for this interview. First of all, strategically, I'd like to build a big relationship between the research that we do, which is of absolute world class, and the education that the students receive. And by that I mean getting students more involved in the research itself. I think we should listen carefully to what the students are telling us.
I mean, talking about students and their ability to communicate, listening to their needs, one group that is always very vocal is of course the student union, and it must be said that our student union did have some friction with the last provost. And I have to ask, where do you stand with student politics? Do they affect your decision making, or do you think they're just overpaid sabbatical officers? Where do you stand?
I think we need a proper relationship with them. I think, we may differ in our politics, I don't know, we may not. But we surely share one thing in common, which is that we want to make the experience for students in this university better, both in terms of the education that the students receive and other aspects. Now, if the SAB officers are prepared to work with me on that, then I think we have common ground and we can do a lot of good work together.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there were points of disagreement with yourself and the student union.
Not too many.
Well, the only one I wanted to bring up was when you suggested in 2009 a possible cut of 10% in lead staff. Obviously there was this motion of no confidence that was passed against you. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, sort of how that obviously made you feel, but how you responded to that and sort of moved on from the student union's decision.
Well, when you're running a big institution, okay, there are a few things that are absolutely have to be in the right place, okay, and critically important to that is the finances of the institution. Without the money in the right place, you literally can get to the point that you can't pay the staff and the whole thing falls to pieces. So sometimes you have to make tough decisions to keep things financially straight. Now, we didn't actually make 10% of staff redundant. We opened up a voluntary scheme to try and get some savings in order to cope with the inevitable downturn that we were going to have in income, all of which, by the way, came true. So if we hadn't have done that, we would have put the university at severe risk of its survival. So it was a difficult moment. Sometimes in leadership you have to take really tough decisions. It's your job to try and explain those to the community, and sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not.
Okay, another question that I wanted to ask is, the provost is always seen as sort of a very inaccessible figure. I know that personally I only saw Malcolm Grant once when we walked past each other by the Print Room Cafe. So do you have any plans to become more accessible to students and stop being this kind of elusive figure?
Yeah, well, I think out and about is really important, and I've already started that process. I've offered to the SAB officers to do a completely open meeting with students once a term. I think it's up to the SAB officers to organise that, and that's an opportunity for me to listen and meet people, meet students.
I think a lot of negative feedback has been surrounding UCL's big projects, the Stratford campus, which I know is not going ahead now, also the UCL Academy, because a lot of students feel that big money is being spent on these huge projects and they would rather see it spent, on a smaller level within individual departments. And I just wondered sort of where your priorities lie. Is it with the big long-term future projects, or is it with the immediate short-term needs?
Well, inevitably it'll have to be a bit of both. The position that University College London is in is a very, very strong one, and we have got the opportunity, if we want to take it, to really build on what's already happened and create a fantastic future for this university for decades or even centuries to come. But there are also some internal things that I can spot now. This campus, quite a lot of it could do with quite a significant facelift, couldn't it? That will lift morale, it will lift our pride in the place. Mm-hmm. So there will be a combination of the short-term and the longer-term projects for sure.
I mean, obviously all universities are facing difficulties with the government cuts, which I know you yourself have criticised. However, your expenses have been brought up by both the cheese grater and the lead student. So just for people that don't know about it, from 2007 to 2013, your expenses came to £70,000, and the biggest figures that really stuck out were for hotel nights.
Yeah.
So in 2007, £618 at the Russell Hotel. 2 nights at the St James Sofitel came to £727.88. And then another thing that was pointed out is since 2006, you've been spending on average £7,000 a year on hotel bills, which is double what Malcolm Grant spent. So we have to ask, how do you sort of reconcile the fact that you're against government cuts, the fact that you considered cutting lease staff by 10% with these huge expenses? Because in this current climate, is it right for a provost to be staying in 5-star hotels and taking first-class flights?
Well, I think you'll find that they were business class flights, which was in my contract. I think you'll find they were predominantly 4-star hotels, not 5-star.
But
the bottom line is, if you want the provost to build the reputation and the business of the university, then that involves travel. Now, for me from Leeds, particularly when I was chairman of the Russell Group, that involved a lot of staying in London. And of course, the one thing that Malcolm Grant didn't need to do when he was in London was to rent a hotel. So I believe that's the main difference. But also, you're looking at somebody who, frankly, was what could be described as a net profit centre for the University of Leeds. So quite a lot of that was visiting alumni and donors overseas, from which the net receipts at the University of Leeds at the time that I left was £39 million.
I mean, no one's doubting your success because you did an excellent job at Leeds. But I think the question that students are asking is, does it have to be 4-star hotels? Does it have to be business class flights? Because it's kind of one of those things where lead by example. Everyone's facing the strain. Students are facing the strain in a big way. Many departments are. And it would be, a real show of support for the provost to say, I'll fly economy and I'll stay in a slightly cheaper hotel.
We can think about that. You've got to also think that I'm going in, I'm having meetings immediately when I arrive. I'm staying very short periods and coming straight back into the maelstrom of routine activities here at UCL. I'll give you an example. There's a flight coming up shortly where I'll be coming back from New York. I arrive at 11 and I'll be running a head of departments meeting at 3. Yeah. So I think there is a little bit of the provost actually being able to survive that sort of pace and schedule that I think people need to understand.
Okay, I mean that's good to know. It's just for us as students looking at these expenses bills, it's the whole host of things. It's the £350 dinner at the Cinnamon Club for you and one other person. And with that, I know in Leeds your salary went from £170,000 in 2004 to £280,000 in 2012. So I hope you can understand why it's difficult for students to accept sort of the large expenditure that you've been used to at Leeds and then thinking that it could be brought over to UCL.
Well, I don't think it will be, for the reason that I've explained. I won't be travelling to Leeds and staying in a hotel, whereas clearly when you're in Leeds you do have to travel to London.
Like foreign hotels
that will indeed
entertaining clients and investors.
There will indeed be, and my expenses will be subject to scrutiny by you as students. They're going to be published actually on the web.
Okay.
So there's going to be no hiding this.
No.
And I'll have to be able to justify every expense that's made.
Yeah. I know when you were at Leeds, there was, the Leeds student brought it up, the fact that Jimmy Savile had offered a donation of £300,000 which was going to be spread out from 2008, 2013, and that was for the Lower Scholarship Scheme. And you said in your final interview, I think it was, with Lead Student, it was on the 3rd of May, you were sort of very clear, you said you decided not to accept the money, you wouldn't want to accept any illegality, and you'd always look at the reputation on issues, which, you know, I thought was very admirable. But we wanted to bring up the fact that Pi revealed as an exclusive that on the 24th of October 2012, the UCL had received over £500,000 from arms companies. So some of them were private arms companies, some of them were government funded, and it was all coming through the Department of Defence. And UCL had said in 2008 that they were going to stop this kind of funding. So there's obviously some money coming into UCL that I would say personally is coming from companies with a bit of a bad reputation. And I have to ask, are you going to be as stringent at UCL as you were in Leeds when you rejected that Jimmy Savile donation?
Well, I think there's a difference between money that comes in for research purposes and where it comes from and what it's for, and whether or not that goes through an ethics process, which I think it should, before decisions are made, versus donations. And for every donation, I would expect that to go through a gift acceptance committee. And literally last week we were thinking about how we would configure that gift acceptance committee to review all potential donors. Actually, I think it's best to do it in advance of even getting into a discussion about funding. So we will try to be as careful as we can about the money that we accept, and make sure that we feel that there are no reputational consequences.
I mean, the part of the issue with the arms funding was when it was discovered in 2012 by Pi, we managed to find out that it was over £500,000, but it wasn't clear exactly who had been donating how much, because obviously there isn't complete transparency with these kinds of transactions. I mean, is there likely to be more transparency in the future as to, you know, exactly who's giving this money and how much they're giving? Because I know you also have to respect the confidentiality of some of these companies.
Indeed, and it's a bit complicated, is that issue, and some major donors don't want any publicity, and they don't want to, usually for good reasons, they don't want to be associated with the donation. So I think that's a complex issue, and I think we'll have to take each case on a case-by-case basis. Okay.
And then my final question was, I mean, I've just been sort of looking at everything that you're involved in. You're obviously incredibly talented. The list is ridiculously long. You're Commissioner of the Fulbright Commission, a council member for the Medical Research Council. You're on the board of the Worldwide Universities Network. You're chair of the advisory group for National Specialised Services, and you're a council member for the Council of Industry and Higher Education, which Malcolm Grant is also on. And I wanted to ask, I mean, do you see these roles impinging on your time here as provost? Because one of the biggest criticisms of Malcolm was the fact that he was he was advising the government, about the NHS. And the criticism was that being a provost had almost become a part-time job for him because he was juggling two big roles.
Some of the list that you read out there is historic. So I did chair the advisory group for National Specialist Services, which was about 4 days a year and about 4 half days of preparation. For 3 years, but in the changes in the NHS, that's been dissolved and is now absorbed into the greater thing that Malcolm is chairing, called NHS England.
And are you?
And I've declined the opportunity to chair anything new. The Council of the Medical Research Council is something I've done for the last 7 years. I've got 1 more year to do. And then I'll stop that. And the Fulbright Commission is somewhere between 2 and 4 days a year. So I'm pretty confident that having done a lot of external activities in my past jobs, that I've got the balance about right. And certainly starting a new job here at UCL, it's very clear to me that this place demands 98-99% of my time. There's always going to be 1 or 2% of external activities like the ones you've mentioned, but it's literally just the two. Council of the MRC, 1 more year, and the Council for
Industry and Higher Education.
Industry and Higher Education, thank you. It's kind of by the fact that we're a subscriber that you go onto that council.
Yeah,
I've
no,
never
I
actually
gathered.
been to a meeting.
Okay, all right. Just like to say thank you so much for speaking to us, and I wish you all the best in your new role.
Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. I'm a Vice Chancellor, of course I'm going to witter on.
No, you're a provost now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're at UCL.